What's up, Columbia State early humanities peeps and people and everybody? I hope everybody's doing well, and I hope that this video is informative and that you enjoy it. So, as you may remember from my first discussion post, I think I mentioned that I went to Italy this summer. So for June, I was in Italy. I was actually on the Italy program. I took social psychology under Miss Grigsby, Miss Doc. Um, so our teacher actually mentioned that the other day, and pretty proud of that. Not proud, but definitely grateful that I got to have that experience, and she was super informative. And I got to learn so much. One of the really cool parts of the trip was our first city was Rome. So we were in Rome, taking in the architecture, the art. There was just a vast amount of things to take in. It was totally sensory overload, but it was really fun, really informative, and totally awesome. So I thought for this discussion post, I would do something based on that just because I was just in that art and that culture and I just enjoyed it so thoroughly. So I wanted to do something there. And the thought came to my mind, what about the Roman arch? So we learned about that a little bit. There's still Roman arches standing today. They're super impressive. It's, basically a wonder to me that they're still standing because they're now ancient arches that are standing there for different uses from when they were made, but now we just look at them as like when you really see them in person, it's almost like, is somebody playing a joke on me? Is this really possible? Is this really happening? Could an ancient civilization, or somebody that doesn't have the tools that we have today, have built something so massive and impressive, and a lot of times put such immense detail onto it? So arches are just amazing. And then as you go around Rome, you just realize everything has arches. So I was like, the arch would be a great thing to cover, especially since it's important for art and architecture and for the Romans. So I think it touches a lot of different educational fronts. So I depicted this arch that I took a picture of while we went to the Colosseum, which the Colosseum was pretty packed. We had to get pushed through there a little too fast. The Forum was a little bit cooler because it had a lot of beautiful architecture and monuments and buildings and stuff that we had a lot more time and space to go through it. But this piece here, this piece here is something that I drew. I just sketched it up. Because I was standing in the Colosseum, walked around, and the whole thing is made of arches. Like I said, it just seems like every Romanesque building is made of arches. So it's really cool to just stare at them and be like, how did they do that? And I got kind of obsessed with them because they're so interesting. As you can see here on the top, you have these long bricks, and the more you stare at them, the more interesting it is because the bricks are laid, they're really long, thin bricks, and they're laid in like a sunbeam type of pattern. And, just doing this project, I learned that actually was like revolutionary. And in this class, I learned that it was revolutionary for architecture because it allowed them to have bigger monuments and buildings. And that's because the arch made the weight go to the pillars. So you were able to disperse the weight better so that you could have a more intense amount of weight on top of it. So it's interesting that they used it for buildings and then they used it for other things. I'm going to get to that more thoroughly. But I just thought this was a beautiful scene. If you want to look at the actual picture and some actual other pictures of arches that I thought were amazing in Italy, I'll have those on my discussion post because there were just so many and they're so cool. There's so many of them, and it's like they'll be built into things or they will, be an arch. Like the Colosseum, everything is like an arch. It's just arch, all the way up, all the way down, all the way around. And that's so that the weight will be, dispersed properly, and it gives it the ability to to hold the things correctly. So the arch is very important for what they were doing at the time, and is also very important for their success. Like the aqueducts, arches, they're arches. And then bridges that they would build were made out of arches. All sorts of buildings. So you have smaller arches that are built into the brick around them, or you have standalone arches, and each one of them is important and did something for the architecture. So I think that they're just beautiful, and they do a ton. So you have a territorial type where the Romans would put them down to mark their territory, to mark countries or settlements, to mark a Roman road that came through the area. So it had a practical reason, but then you also had them for monumental or triumphant arches, as you may have heard. So that was like the Constantine arch. Like it's more to depict like this guy has won a lot of battles. This guy's very important. So the arch would have history carved onto it. And it wouldn't really hold anything. You know, like the Colosseum is made up of a bunch of arches, but the Arch of Constantine, which is just outside of the Colosseum, it's just standalone, and it just tells the story of who he was and what he did and why he's important. So there's different types of arches, and they all have their importance, but they wouldn't be possible without the Roman brick. The Romans kind of had their own method and creation of bricks, which made it possible to make the arch. So you have a lot of bricks that are smaller and thicker, or thinner and longer, and this gives them the ability to make structurally sound buildings and such, so that you could have the pillars that were very strong with a thicker, smaller brick, and then the arches, which would have the full array of an arch with a longer, thinner brick. And that's really cool. And I think I said in the beginning of this, the Roman arch. But it's actually, the Romans learned it from the Etruscans. So they didn't actually create it, but they perfected it, and they used concrete in between it so that they could make a proper arch and, support the weight correctly. And so it's like, they didn't create it. It's not technically the Roman arch, but the ones that they have are the Roman arch. And the ones that we remember now are Roman arches because they're in or around Rome. And they were built by the Romans. And if you ever get the chance to go, please look at the arches, take your time to check them out, because they're wonderful pieces and they tell so much about their ability and the things that the Romans could do and that ancient people could do with less equipment and just some time and thought. So thank you very much for watching my discussion post, and I hope you check out the rest of my little things I'm going to have on here, because very interesting, and the trip to Italy was awesome, and I got to learn a lot and see a lot of beautiful arches. So be safe and have a good night.